On that hair. Welcome, everyone. It's Career Happy Hour. It's 3 o'clock Pacific time here in Beaverton, Oregon. And it's time for us to get together as a community and see how we can collaborate and share and support each other in our careers because we call this Career Happy Hour. And indeed, it's Friday and it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Let's see, probably in Chicago it's 5 o'clock, or in Dallas it's 5 o'clock. But in in the East Coast, New York and such, is probably 6 o'clock. So, but the idea is here, at least here in our area, happy hour starts at 3 o'clock. It's 3 to 6, and then you're on your own after that. So, welcome. I'm Andrew Beach. I'm a teacher of self education. I help professionals like you communicate value to find great opportunities faster, whether you're working or not. That's through a pragmatic process of branding, planning, and effective networking. Effective networking means we collaborate with each other, and that's what this community really is about. And so, if you would please put into the chat box where you're joining from and your LinkedIn profile. So, I have a LinkedIn profile, and you can connect with me through that method. If you're joining by YouTube or Facebook or some other tool, then by all means, go ahead and actually select, if you would, my profile on LinkedIn and go ahead and connect with me. It's amazing how many people attend these sessions that never reach out and say, hey, Andrew, I watched your session. I got a lot out of it. Or, hey, let's connect. I'd like to have a conversation. So that's open to you. LinkedIn is a wonderful place to network. Now, the challenge with networking on LinkedIn is there's 800 million plus accounts. Where do I find and how do I get people to respond to me? They might not. That's the honest truth, is they might not respond to you. And you shouldn't take that the wrong way. But this community, I think I started, and I want to emulate this concept or this philosophy. And that is, if you put your LinkedIn profile in the chat, you're signaling to everybody here in this happy hour community that you indeed are okay with them reaching out to you and having a conversation that way. So if you can, put your LinkedIn profile in the chat or the comments of this video, even after the fact. If it's a replay, great. If it's, if you're watching this live and you're on LinkedIn, great. Go ahead and do that. Just say, hey, I'm here, or happy Friday, everybody, that sort of thing. There's also a live coaching option here. So what I'm going to do is that if you want to come on live, literally like right now, and get hands-on coaching by me, you can do that. You can absolutely do that. So let me get to the live stream here on hang on, let me make sure I mute the site. I wouldn't want it to create issues with y'all, but I will go ahead and put the link for you to join live and get coaching now. So that link, I think you'll have to copy and paste it. I'll also put it, I don't think I can put it in the description. It doesn't let me, I don't think it lets me edit this on the fly. So I don't think you can change the description once it's created. So I'll just put that in the chat. If you're here, copy and paste that and stick it in your browser, and you'll come into the back end of Restream into the green room, and we'll ask you if you want to have some coaching, or if you have a question, you can put your question in the chat on Restream. So that's that. Now, if you have questions about your career, great, put them in the chat. If it's interviewing or networking, or how to build a brand, or how to interview, or what are some of the challenges you're facing, go ahead and put those out there, because we do have a topic here, and I typically teach a little bit on a topic and get the juices flowing based on what I'm experiencing inside of some of the conversations I'm having with coaching clients and people that I run into when I'm networking. These common themes seem to be coming up, and so I figure doing these streams, provide a little value, and then you can ask questions or even come on live and get your own coaching. So put your questions in there. One way that you can help support this community is to spread the word. I do this as a community service, as a way to give back to the people that have been so generous and supportive of me. And so I'm grateful for everything that I have, and I'm interested in paying it forward by providing you the same kind of value. So that said, go ahead and share this out. I mean, you can share it in a private message. You can share every platform I'm aware of. has a share button on it. So just hit the little share button and share it out to your networks, or even in a private message or email is fine too. But make sure we get some more people involved in this particular community so that we can have some support that way. So one of the things that I was really thinking about today is some of the most important conversations we can have. Certainly there's a lot of conversations to be had when it comes to your career. But I wanted to really talk about something that I experienced today and throughout this week about certain individuals, I will say that I've either coached or interacted with, some that have it and some that don't. And that is this future focus, some sort of future focused conversation with yourself and people around you. Now, why is that so important? Well, it's very easy, and I've been there too, for us to get heads down in our work and try to do a good job and then cross our fingers and hope someone recognizes us for our contributions. Now, that does work. It can work. It's just not as, how should I say it, intentional, on purpose, or even fulfilling or exciting to just put the head down and do the work, unless, of course, it's work that you love to do. Then that may be the exception. However, what I've more noticed is that people are more stuck in, I shouldn't say stuck, more focused on, directed by their past and their current circumstance. So their past and what they've done and where they've been and the education they have, that's who they are. And then their current circumstance might be in flux, both personally and professionally. They may be working through some things, and that happens, right? Health and relationships and all those things. It's messy, right? And so life is messy. Good to see you, Terry. Welcome. Always nice to have you in a career happy hour here. So please, if you're interested, you're welcome to come in the back end and we can have a conversation. You're more than welcome to do that. So I was thinking, what would be the best or most important career conversation you could have of your lifetime? And that, and it may sound really weird, but it starts with yourself. And that is, hey, have a career conversation with yourself. Are you where you want to be? Are you on a direction or a trajectory that's good for you? Do you see a compelling future, whether that's in business or let's see, professionally or through your pro bono work or whatever? Do you have something? I work with a lot of folks that are bridging to retirement, and not that retirement isn't something to aspire to. It's just not inspiring to a lot of people or aspirational in terms of retirement. And so I would be more interested in hearing a story about what you want to do in retirement, other than, how would I put it? Working on your golf score or Mai Tais on a beach in Maui. I assume that all of these things are going to happen in retirement, right? You're going to have some travel and some different things, but I want to hear a more compelling story about, what are you going to give? What are you going to do to give back to the world or to the community or to your family or that sort of thing? Are you going to start a school or do some pro bono work? So that frame of mind. Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, it's really important when we start thinking about these things in terms of our frame of mind and the conversations we're having with ourselves. We can now really put together a way to advocate for ourselves. So let's say you had a desire or an aspiration to lead a team of people and also make a difference in diversity and inclusion. Let's just use that as an example. But your current role doesn't allow that. And so we can look at that and maybe even talk to some people in HR, and they try to map us over and talk about all the things we need to educate ourselves on. But what it might turn out is that we actually are in a position of thinking about our limitations or what we don't have rather than what we bring. What do we bring to that role? And these future conversations, I think, are really, really important. What do we need to do to prepare, AKA take action? Yeah, good question. So the idea here is once you've had these conversations about your past and where you've been and that sort of thing, is to take a look at how that relates to your current situation or your current status and what you want to do in the future. So I look at it kind of like a bridge. Okay, so there's a place that I started at that led me to where I am now, to where I intend to go. So I really look at it like a bridge. And so if I can look at across the river, let's say you're standing at on the bank of a river, and you can look across and see the other side, and you start building your bridge over to the other side, and all of a sudden you're kind of halfway across the river, and you look over, and the other bridge, the other half of the bridge is 2 miles down the river, and so you built a bridge that's not going to connect. So part of this is having enough understanding of where you've been, where you are, and where you want to go, that you can paint this picture to yourself, and then you can paint this picture to someone else. And so you start thinking aspirationally, or things you're thinking about, or this kind of concept is foreign to a lot of people. And the action really is to say, hey, maybe the action you need to take is up to you, but maybe the action you need to take is just to give yourself permission. I give myself permission to think about my future and where I want to be. Mai Tais on a beach in Maui might be in that mix, right? You're designing your future, so you get to put different things in it. Now, the things you put in it may be great for you, and you can have those conversations. But then there's a part of it that you want to share with somebody else. And so I use this example all the time. There's a friend of mine that he retired, and he didn't tell anybody, or at least he didn't make this giant, huge formal announcement. He didn't put it on his social media. He didn't, turn his social media off. He actually decided to just talk about Habitat for Humanity. That's it. That's all he talks about. He goes on projects for them. He travels the world for them. He's an evangelist for them. Does he do that for work? No, he's completely volunteer, pro bono. In fact, he's probably giving them more time, energy, and money than anything else. Why? Because he has the financial means to do that. And so I think that's really, really helpful. So if that's you, then I totally understand. So yes. Now, part of this, I agree, Tracy, is giving back. Giving back. I believe that is indeed true. And so what you may want to consider is, what contributions can I give to other people in order to activate what I would refer to as the reciprocity, the law of reciprocity. And not that I'm doing it to get reciprocation. I'm doing it in anticipation that reciprocation would be naturally developed. Because if it's not naturally developed, then you haven't activated the law of reciprocity. You've activated manipulation. And so it has to be natural. There are many times where I've gotten gifts from somebody and I felt really uncomfortable about it. So I reciprocated. Why? Because I wanted there to be a balance. And so if that's the case, then certainly we can make those things a reality. And it looks like somebody came in here to the green room. Let me just put a little message in there. Okay, so I'll just put a little message in there for that person. Sure. Okay. Well, just make sure. So a couple things. If you want to come on live, first of all, make sure you have some way to manage the audio, because often there's an echo and the video is playing in the background. And so you may have a tab open that's got the video playing, and we're going to get an echo. And so that's not really helpful. And so if you do have indeed a question that you want to support on, and you want to maybe get some perspective and work through it together, then that's great. So just make sure you have a way to have audio, and that there isn't and video, audio and video. And so if you can turn your video on, and then we can work through the audio issues if we have any, that would be great. So I'll get there in just a second. Yeah, so that's the first part. So the first part is, it's okay, I give you permission, have a conversation with yourself about your past, present, and future, and how to build a bridge. Now, there's parts of this that are productive or constructive, I suppose. I don't know if I'd call it constructive, but maybe productive, right? Productive conversation, right? About your future, about the value you bring to the world and to the organizations you want to collaborate with. Your desires, your aspirations, the things you see yourself doing. Start thinking about those things and really articulating to yourself what that looks like. And so what I think it was Zig Ziglar who said, the best conversations you can have are the ones with yourself, unless you catch yourself going, huh? Huh? Anyway, so that's something to think about. So those are productive conversations. What are not productive? Well, talking about what you don't have or how you don't meet the expectations of another individual. And so yes, this can be problematic that you are in a position where you're having conversations with yourself that create tension or friction or circular reasoning, asking yourself, why is it this way? Or why do I do these things? Or how come I can never, right? There's certain conversations you catch yourself in, because I do it all the time too. Oh, I don't have a degree in HR, so I can't be in HR, or I don't have 15 years experience as an HR business partner, or look at these different things, and I want to go into HR. So I can look at my limitations, or I can think more critically about my capability to actually bring a new perspective to that situation, or bring a set of experiences that may not be uh, in congruence with uh, the train of thought in that particular domain. Because if I had that experience, then I would be just like everyone else. I would have that same perspective. We'd see things the same way, and that's not always helpful. It may not be as productive as you could imagine. So looks like we have Larry in the green room here. So I'm going to bring Larry in, and we'll have a little conversation and see how we can support Larry. So please, if you would, put any suggestions or contributions to support Larry as he comes in. And so let's welcome Larry in here. Larry, can you hear me? Yeah, so I can't hear you. So maybe there's something wrong with my audio here. Let me make sure I have it turned on properly. And and then so um, yeah, that's turned on right. No, it's not. Let's go over here. Are you there? No, doesn't look like we're there. Choose your, yeah, so you may want to adjust your settings. There should be a gear icon down at the bottom of your screen. And so you'll have audio there. If you see that, Larry, go ahead and select audio input and make sure you have the right input selected. And maybe that'll work. I heard something. Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, a little bit of a lag. Excellent. Welcome to Career Happy Hour.
Thank you.
What's your question, and how can we support you today? Oh, looks like we lost Larry. So yeah, it doesn't always work out. We do our best. So let's see what Tracy has to say. Hello from South Carolina, Lori. Thank you for that. Spectacular achievement is always precedented by unspectacular preparation. Interesting. Is that a Tracyism, or is that somebody else? Somebody else said that. Yeah, and yes, hi, Lori. Good to see you. There is indeed a link in the chat if you want to come on live. That's open to just about anybody here that wants to have access. Let me see if I can get that link back into the chat here on LinkedIn. And if you want to come on live, you can absolutely do so if you want to. Or if you have a question and you don't want other people to see your question, or you want it to remain private or confidential, then come into the green room, put your name in anonymous or confidential. It asks you what your name is, and you get to type it in. So just put it in confidential. So it's easy to do that. Wonderful. So that's what we're attempting to do here, is to have a dialogue and support each other. And Terry's here. Terry comes on occasionally, so if he has something to add to the conversation, that would be great. I think it's always good to have a perspective from inside organizations, and there are certainly organizations that get this. They have coaching available, or they have a coaching culture where they support their employees that way, and they try to map out what's next for you. You've been in this role for so long, and are you satisfied, and where would you like to go next, and how do you want to be developed? And these are conversations that all good leaders should have with their people. And if we're not having those conversations, then someone else is. So that means, hey, if I'm not having that conversation with my people and they're here now, they're going to go have that conversation with somebody else. So I would just prefer not to have that happen at the organizations I would be a part of. And certainly Terry could probably talk about some strategies or ideas or thoughts there. So Terry, if you want to come on, you're more than welcome to do that. And so the reason I'm addressing this is because a lot of people have a challenge with it, because we feel sometimes that life comes at us, comes real fast, and we just respond. So stimulus response, and we don't have a lot of time, or we don't create space to have a thought process that says, okay, here's where I am, here's where I've been, and here's where I'd like to go. And so this is what I see myself doing. And these kind of conversations are really helpful. So one of the things I'm really interested in is this domain of experience management. And how do we, and so one of the things I've learned recently is, you can have experiences for people, and these individuals want their privacy maintained. And so if we think about it that way, I'm learning new things about experience management. How do we create great employee experiences and customer experience and candidate experience? And just every experience you would have with an organization is a good one. So I think about, not to pick out a company, but I aspire, or at least appreciate, what Amazon brings in the marketplace. Now, the question would be, do you have the same experience as a candidate as you do a customer? And is there alignment there? So these are the things I start thinking about my future, and I start thinking about how can we as an organization, regardless of what organization it is, create consistent experiences across all populations, and have an opportunity to have them be great customers, maybe a future employee, maybe a great candidate experience leads them to be a customer. I think these things are all interconnected. And if we don't have a way to do that as an enterprise, not just as customer service or sales and talent acquisition and HR, right? We're all working these things independently. I think that could be a challenge. Oh, it looks like Terry's in the green room here, so we'll bring in the auspicious the auspicious Terry Smith. Good afternoon.
Auspicious.
Yeah,
Auspicious. Wow. That's a nickel word, man.
yeah. Well, so
How are you?
good. Happy Friday. It's
And
career
to
happy
you.
hour.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I dressed appropriately for happy hour.
Yeah, I just threw on a polo. It just happened to be in my closet. So
I thought I'd go for it and go with the drink-oriented Penguin shirt, which
yeah,
I didn't even know Penguin was still making shirts. So, I
yeah,
found this at the local, Five and Dime or something. So,
yeah, yeah. So I'd like to ask you a question though, Terry, because you've, I think, been in a lot of roles yourself, and so you can talk as a employee, candidate, whatever you want to call it that. And then you've also been in a position to influence organizations and how they treat employees and how they handle candidate experience and these different things. So I'd be interested to know how often did you, when you were either on one side or the other of that column, have future-based conversations of your own or with your people? And what did that look like?
yeah, good question. I think on the one side of the column, or in the column of sitting on the side of being sort of the candidate, that I've been fortunate enough to be in it. Well, fortunate in a certain sense to be interviewed for positions where that was a kind of a key factor, is sort of that strategic thinking and that long term sort of where do we want to be in this and such time, and I always kind of try to frame it in terms of sort of a right to left thinking, right? What does the future look like? What does success look like? And then work backwards from there to the incremental, where are we today and what's it going to take step by step to get there? And so I've had a lot of opportunities to interview over the years with companies who are very interested in that. The intriguing part of it is, and I've experiencing this with a certain company I've been working with recently, there's a lot of energy around that, at least at some level, but we tend as business people to obviously focus mostly on the problems that are right in front of us and the challenges that are maybe no more than a quarter away, particularly if we're in a publicly traded organization, right? We look at that 12-week hockey stick as being kind of the be all and end all of how we do things. And so I think there's a real desire in a lot of organizations to think in that long term And there's a lot of organizations that just, get focused very, very closely on those quarter over quarter numbers, because obviously you have shareholders to deal with and all that. So what I try to help people think about is, okay, let's keep that, whatever that is, 2-year, 3-year, 5-year picture out there, and let's do that work back to today. And then what are the things we can do within each of those, whether it's monthly, quarterly, half yearly, or what have you, within each of those frames that build towards what we want the future to look like. And as long as you can kind of draw those connections for people and help them see that, yeah, if I do this set of things in this order, the likelihood of achieving what the future should look like or what success should look like grows, simply because I know what I need to do today, tomorrow, next week, incrementally, that's going to get me there. And so the trick then is to, help people understand how to do that, and how to think about it in those terms and connect the dots between out there and today. And so I think, when I've had the opportunity to be inside organizations, that's what we try to help people focus on, is what does this have to do with that?
Nice. So, okay. So as a leader in that domain, right? HR, I would
Yep.
say, you've probably been parts of organizations that got it. And maybe you are even part of implementing those kind of solutions where, hey, let's have really constructive conversations on regular cadence. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's all just performance based, but it's certainly something that says, hey, outside of the performance and the day to day, what sort of interactions am I having with this individual, and make sure they're headed a direction they need to go, so that we
Yeah.
can not only retain them as an employee, but also make sure they're skilling in the right trajectory that supports them in the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, the two things go hand in hand, right? I mean, you have to, as a leader, what I have to focus on is, what does success look like in the future? What does success look like now? And how does that tie to what each person on my team wants out of their career, both, in that success oriented future and also in the right now? How can what we're doing now help you, on the team feel, that you're contributing and that you're, doing work that's meaningful to you, and so forth. And the interesting thing about it is that there are a lot of people that I think that really resonate with that. But there's a percentage of the population, interestingly enough, at least in my mind, that are kind of like, look, I'm just going to, I'm here to do a job. I'm going to show up. I'm going to punch the clock. I'm going to, and then when I get done, I'm going to go home, lather, rinse, repeat. Right.
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, you say that's sort of almost a necessary element of our community of work. On the other hand, if you accept the notion that you're always trying to build a better team, then you have to think in terms of, how can I either A, help that person out of that mentality, or B, if they're not going to get out of that mentality, or they're not willing to work with you to get, to that next level, then you've got another decision to make, right? And that's probably the hardest part of it, is when you know that you've got somebody that just either isn't a fit for the direction that the team wants to go in, or just isn't willing to, explore possibilities, right, about where they could go. They just want to do their job, check their ambition at the door, and then go home at the end of the day, and that's that. And that's fine. But that's somebody that may not be suitable for the kind of team, certainly, that I would want to build,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, certainly level in the organization and people's willingness or appetite for having those kind of conversations. They may not, if you grew up old school like my parents, it's like, hey, work is supposed to be work, right? It's this Protestant work ethic, and I go there to slog all day long, and I go home and I leave work at work if I can, right? And we separate those two things. But the current model today, I don't think is amenable to that kind of thing, in that we're really tasked as individuals to direct our own careers,
right,
and develop our own skills. And yes, the company may be a vehicle to make that a reality, but we have to drive the process in some capacity.
Well, and particularly these days where, with everything that's happened, over the last couple of years, the lines between those two things in a lot of cases, not all cases, but in a lot of cases have really, really been blurred. And so I think there's sort of this, we've talked before about the great resignation and the great this, that, and the other thing that people call it. But I mean, part of it is, really starting to grapple with that blurring of lines, right? That realization that, my life and my work are not two separate things necessarily. And especially given the way we spend time at work and the way we occupy significant portions of our waking hours with work, there's a logic to the notion that you want to get the most out of it that you can get out of it, and feel good about your accomplishments when you know, cross that blurred line, right?
Mhm.
And whether, I grew up in a similar family, that Protestant work ethic kind of family, and um, I always kind of associated myself, sort of who I am with what I do, and the
Mm,
work that I
mhm.
do. And then there's the natural sort of thing that kicks in with that says, I want to be proud of what it is I've done or that I do or that I accomplish, right? I want to be able to look back and say, look what I did. And I think that's, when you think about sort of that Protestant work ethic, and that focus on, you know, work is work, life is life, and near the two shall meet, or however that goes, near the twain shall meet.
Right.
Um, you know, I think that is certainly from a generational standpoint. I think a lot of that's washed away, and then you have this impact of this giant worldwide event that could, blurs the lines even further. And I think what you have is a real rethinking of all of that going on,
Mhm.
today. And the numbers bear it out. I mean, look at the number of people that are willingly leaving their jobs and the subset of those people who have other jobs they're going to, and more importantly, those people who are just leaving, right?
Mhm.
Because they're rethinking it. They're at least some portion of them are rethinking, what their role is, what their world is like, and how they really fit in it, and how work fits what they do or who they are.
Yeah, and if you have the financial means or runway to make those decisions and take that risk, people are taking the risk.
Yeah,
A-
absolutely.
and I think the trend, at least that I'm perceiving, is that we're probably going to get to a point where it's compensation for value, right? That we're adding value and we're gaining compensation, and the individual is going to drive that marketplace because I don't see that talent acquisition is agile enough in many companies, not all, to bring in the right people, to retain the right talent, and the work still needs to be done. And so I could see, and of course, LinkedIn is probably integral in this and kind of pushing things that direction. Is that I can not only put myself out there as someone looking for work, I can also put myself out there as somebody who sells services.
Right.
And so LinkedIn is already creating the infrastructure, as I can see it, for that value for compensation model. And right now they're not charging a fee for that, but other than premium service, right? But
Right.
so now I'm in a position where I could indeed start
Well,
a
and
business.
yeah, and that makes it an interesting concept more from the standpoint of a marketplace. I think is what I am kind of hearing you say is that that it has the potential to become more of this marketplace where it becomes more about sort of that exchange of, services for fee, if you will,
Hmm.
and at the end of the day, that's really the work relationship, right? The employer agrees to a certain set of needs and requirements that the employee can bring in exchange for some remuneration or compensation, right? I mean, that's fundamentally the relationship. And and I agree with you, by the way. I think there is a synergy that LinkedIn can and should pick up off the table to really sort of redefine how they operate in terms of sort of that marketplace model, right? And and there are a number of sort of details that we could get into in a longer conversation around, things that they have done and have not done that kind of support or don't support that concept. But I think that conceptually, I think it's definitely headed that way, and I think the impact on sort of the traditional operatives around comp and benefits and so forth is going to be significant. It's going to play out in very different ways than it plays out now. I also wanted to just come back to one comment that you made about talent acquisition, having, run talent acquisition teams, in my career. One of the things that's important about that is the second word, acquisition, right? The talent acquisition team is sort of the front end of the relationship, or sort of the mouth of the bottle, if you will, and so their job is that it's acquisition. In organizations that are very sophisticated around that, there is a strong connection between the concept of acquisition and how that talent acquisition team operates in the space of retention as well. But in a lot of organizations, that connection isn't being made. Fundamentally, the driver of retention is going to be the line manager. This is obviously, in all the literature, as they say, but, how we as managers operate to support the people that work with us, and really that we serve, so that they, so that the people that are doing the work that we're asking them to do can do it in the best way that they can. That's really our job as a manager of people. And so, that's where the retention element really comes into play, and where I think it really lives. Now, the acquisition team, in a more sophisticated mindset, can really augment that and really add a lot of value to that. But a lot of organizations, that's another thing that they don't necessarily pick up off the table that often. So,
Right. Yeah, and I can agree with that. It's funny. I keep thinking about how many people, when they get an offer, are asked to put their side hustle on hold, or how much time is that going to take, or is that going to be a conflict of interest? And I don't know if organizations really, they could try, right? But I don't think they're going to get 100% of any candidate or any employee. They're only getting a certain percentage. And the sooner an organization and a leader can understand that they're trading value for compensation, not time, and not these other things that are going on. As long as they deliver the value, they get the compensation. And,
right.
And a lot of leaders don't feel that way. There's like you said, when we talked early on, when the pandemic first came on, we started talking about line of sight and these kind of old, I don't know if I call them outdated, but hard to die kind of management philosophies that just don't work if you want to retain people and make them feel like they're honored in their workplace.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, and my least favorite of any of those elements is the phrase "trust but verify." That, I mean,
it works in diplomatic relations, but
right. But in the very relationship that we're talking about, the trade of value for compensation, right? You have to be able to support a level of trust, because if you spend, and this has been the death of a lot of leaders that I've run into over the years, not literally, but the notion that, well, I'm going to spend a portion of my time verifying that my people are doing the work they're supposed to be doing. If you think about that, if you break that down, it completely invalidates the first word of the phrase, which is trust, right? Because you are behaving in a manner by verifying that says fundamentally, I don't trust you,
right?
Or I trust myself more than I trust you, and trust is difficult. Trust is very, very challenging. That we can all agree on that. But the work relationship that can be most effective involves the highest amount of willingness to trust that the person that you hired for a specific job, for their skill set and their abilities and so forth, can do them and can be effective. And you don't need to always be verifying what they're doing, right? Steve Jobs had a number of different, quotations about this from the, various sources, about just the notion that, I hire people because they can do what I can't do, right? And they can do it on a scale that I can't do. Now, as the boss, I want to understand what they're doing, and I'm going to question it. And I'm also going to hire people who are willing and able to question me and to push back on me. That's, and I trust that they will do that. And I trust their thinking enough that I will, respect what they say. I will respect what they bring to the table. And sometimes if they can convince me, I am not afraid to say, okay, let's do it your way. Right.
Yeah.
So that's and maybe, somebody could say, well, that's a different kind of verifying, but he's still verifying. Well, okay, we can split that hair, but fundamentally, you have to, and this is an old school thing, trust but verify. I'm going to verify because I don't necessarily trust. I think I've told you the story about a financial leader who, if I can't see them, I'm not convinced that they're working right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the deepest trust but verify thing you can think of.
Yeah.
So anyway,
yeah, of course, right? If you're not delivering the value, then there's a conversation to be had.
Right.
And I think the process for a lot of companies, if they want to create a good candidate experience, it takes too long to verify that through the interview process or any practical interview process you're going to put somebody through, whether it's a panel or a loop or a coding interview, or these systems are designed to see if this person can actually do what they say they can do. And I agree with that.
Yeah.
And yet how much time it takes to do those processes is not very agile for a lot of organizations. And so they lose a potentially really good candidate to a process.
Right.
And that has to be frustrating for everybody. It can't be good for the company. It can't be good for the candidates. Hiring managers are likely not excited to lose someone to the competition because it took 4 weeks to run an interview process.
Yeah, and I can tell some great war stories about that sort of thing. But one of the things that really stuck out for me in the opportunities that I had to do this was to really try and look at all the pieces of that process and try to streamline them as much as possible so that we weren't victims of time, and that was something that has always been a big deal for me. And it's important, from a whole bunch of different perspectives, but time is not something that you should allow to get in the way of what you're doing when it comes to the interview process. There are plenty of ways to reduce time and not reduce effectiveness.
Right.
You can still be effective, but be fast. Right.
Right.
And sometimes that means, actually, I had an example of this years ago where I literally stopped the process altogether and said, what are we doing here? And pulled it apart, looked at it from a system, process flow point of view. And it was a mess, and it was an engineering team. Yeah. And so we said, we're going to rebuild this. We're just going to do this very differently. And let me show you how. And we cut the hiring time by about I'd say about 60%. We really, really cut the time down. But we did it with some very, very simple things. And oddly enough, the retention was at least as good as it had been prior, if not better, as we went forward over the next several years. So we knew that there were ways to do this more effectively, but time should not be your enemy. Time should be your friend.
Absolutely. And, it's amazing because, as you're hiring, right, you still have to keep the business running. You still have timelines to hit and that sort of thing. And it seems to me like most people, not all, deprioritize the value that they can provide by being responsive to a candidate in the hiring process.
Yes.
And making that not, hey, we're going to have 4 interviews in this process and there's going to be a coding challenge and it's, this week is that and 10 days later it's this. And now it's like 6 or 8 weeks down the line.
Yeah.
Why? Because somebody took a vacation or they weren't available or they're in a different time zone, right? There's all these excuses to why to why the process can't be accelerated.
Yeah. And most of them are exactly that. They're excuses. It's if you are running an intentional process around hiring, then you should be able to meet all of the, and this is, I mean, I'm being very generalistic here, but you should be able to hit your marks, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you should be able to say authoritatively, yeah, we can fill this position inside of 30 days, soup to nuts, from the day that we posted it to the day that somebody walks in the door and sits down in the chair, 30 days, right?
Right.
Or whatever your metric is. But then, the longer that metric gets, the more questions you need to ask, right? And the more elements of it you need to look at and say, what are we doing wrong here? Because, and just in fairness, I'm not suggesting that, you've got to shotgun everything, but I am suggesting that you can do it efficiently and effectively and get the results you need and not have it be time unbound, right?
Right.
I knew a company that literally had a position open on the books open for over a year.
Wow.
Over a year. And I sat down with the VP and I said, why would you do that? We were having lunch or something. I said, why would you even tolerate that? Well, it's extremely specialized work and it's very detailed and it's this and it's that and it's standing on your head and
rationalizing
right. Oh my
decision.
Yeah, come on, people. At the end of the day,
So I think the best response to somebody calling you out is just to say, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? And
I don't know what you're talking about.
and sometimes you do that. Sometimes in that chair, you just say, "Guys, look, we are chasing rainbows here.
Yeah.
Let's just get the job done."
Well, and in today's world, I think you risk competitive advantage big time.
Absolutely.
Right? Because if we have such a shortage and you can't get it together fast enough, they're just going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And if you don't have your narrative set up and that you're aligned and your culture is what you say it is, then all these things will be known to a candidate because nothing is secret.
Yeah.
Even though you have a veneer that you try to display to get people to come to your organization, it's not good enough anymore, right? You need to, especially with the advent of Glassdoor and all these other tools, and people network and people know. I mean,
yep, they sure do. Well, and so the net effect of that is, one, you lose talented people. Two, the people that you do wind up hiring are only going to perpetuate the issues that you already have.
So you're a victim of your own process.
Yeah, that's right? A great way to summarize it.
Yeah. And you wonder why, right? Why is this happening to me?
Yeah. And so to Andrea's comment, she says a whole year. Wow. Yeah, Andrea, definitely. Wow. It was unbelievable. I walked away from that lunch just shaking my head saying, guys, you just are not, I mean, it was.
Well, it's funny how you can watch the ascension and the rise and fall of organizations as you interact with them, based on how they treat their people and how they make decisions and that sort of thing. That there's some organizations I'm like, okay, I understand now why you've been at 6 billion in sales for 25 years.
Right.
That you never made it to 10 or 15 or 20 billion. Why? Because of the way you make decisions and the way you treat people. That's just the way it is.
It's a bit of a proof of concept of the Peter Principle, that leaders of an organization like that have risen to their level of incompetence, and that's as far as they're going to get. And the equation for the organization is that's as far as you're going to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as an individual, though, as a candidate, we can look at these different options available to us, and the market's good right now. But as we know, markets go in cycles, and I'm always the type of person, I don't like to be paranoid, but I like to be cautiously optimistic and say, okay, I'm optimistic that my future is going to be better. Why? Because I'm actually talking about it. I'm actually thinking in terms of how my past and my present, and what the trajectory looks like, and where I see the market moving, and the people I talk to, and the different career happy hours I come to, and I get insights that way.
Yeah.
And I get insights from Terry and others that make contributions here. And so what I'm really trying to do is sound a warning bell that things may not go as you think they're going right now. And I would just keep your eyes on the real estate market to know what's going to happen. It's always
Yeah.
been kind of a leading indicator for me to watch, as well as inflation. So I mean, we all know the inflation story. Inflation can be managed, but when you look at real estate, as soon as people can't afford to live somewhere, or what have you, or interest rates go up high enough that people can't afford to buy anymore, then there's going to be some adjustments.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And inflation is a very key metric. But it's interesting because yes, it can be managed. I'm no economist, but I think there's some levers that other than the ones that are being pulled right now, I think there's some other levers that are probably out there that we can probably manage this thing with.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a unique situation because of factors that are just not in our control, right? I mean, the pandemic being the primary driver, right? That changed the entire world. I was working on a consulting gig with a company that does a ton of business in the Pacific Rim, and they do it, via shipping, right?
Mm.
And so guess what? Pandemic hits, ships are bottled up all over the world. The supply chain goes sideways.
Yeah.
And and they can't get product to their customers. They can't even get product out of their warehouses because, to get the product out of the warehouse or even out of the factory to the to the port of call and get it on a ship and get the ship out the port and so on. It would,
Yeah.
I mean, it just fell
Well,
apart.
and I've heard that the opposite is true now. A lot of those ships have landed, and a lot of organizations don't have room in their warehouse.
Right.
And so they brought in all this inventory. The shipping has finally kind of worked its way through.
Right.
Kind of like passing a gallstone, I guess, or something. But you know what I mean? And now here's all this stuff. It's like, okay, I'm hearing stories about people getting shipments to their house, and it's like the wrong thing or the wrong size or whatever. The company says, you know what? We're going to refund you. Keep the merchandise, donate
Right.
it or whatever. And I was like, wow. What is that saying? Well, it's saying that to bring that unit back into the warehouse where there's no room is going to cost them more money than just giving you a refund and telling you to keep it.
Right.
And I don't think that is sustainable.
No, it's definitely not sustainable.
At all.
And if you think about the ripple effects, across multiple, in not only marketplaces but channels, that just becomes a compounded factor. It just ripples, and it's very bad.
Yeah. Well,
But-
what it means is if you have skills in supply chain and you know how to source things from different places or stand up a manufacturing facility in the United States, let's just say, then you have a set of skills that might be in demand.
Yeah.
And so for companies that have capital and are ready to build and so
Yeah.
forth, and you have those skills, then
Yeah, I think there's a whole conversation around that standing up manufacturing in the U.S. Because there are, my way of thinking anyway, with some reasonable infrastructure, which needs improvement. Obviously, we know that. There are plenty of places that you can stand up manufacturing in this country that just are, they're just languishing, right? And there's a whole political motivation around bringing manufacturing back to the United States. There's a whole economic reason why you would, and all that kind of stuff. And I just wonder, I'm hoping that there's movement in that direction around, restarting some of the manufacturing that we offshored so many years ago, because anymore it's not, and again, I'm not an economist, but it seems to me that standing up manufacturing opportunities inside, the United States, in places where we know there's economic hardship that exists. I mean, let's just call that out. But there are people who are willing and able to work, and if you invest in that, and now you're getting into investing in people, if you do that and you're intentional about it, and you look at it from a long term, again, what does success look like in 5 years, and what are the building blocks that we need to do now to get there? I think there are a ton of arguments for how you would go about doing that. It's just me.
Yeah. Well, and Tracy said, great session. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Tracy. You
So-
too.
Well, it was good chatting with you, Terry. It's always good to have you, and looks like you're back, and this time slot works for you. So maybe we just continue these conversations and see what we can do to add value to our community.
Yeah,
And,
I'm happy to.
Yeah,
I'm really. I look forward to this.
Yeah, everybody's welcome to reach out to me or to Terry or to any member of this this community, and you can do that typically through LinkedIn. So
Yeah, by all means.
I think you've already Terry put in your LinkedIn profile somewhere here. So
I did.
Mine is on the screen, and then I will get Terry's here. I think you were really early. There it is.
Yep.
And then there's Terry's LinkedIn profile. So reach out to us. We're welcome to connect. And we're here every Friday, 3 o'clock Pacific time, that I'm alive and available to do these things. And looks like Terry's going to join us. So
Yep.
maybe you'll be a regular guest here on Career Happy Hour.
That'd be fun. I really enjoy these conversations, and I would love to bring in more people and have more more rounded conversations about topics that are important to the people that are here. So by all means.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to bring in Larry, but he had some technical issues, and it's not uncommon that some people just they don't have the stuff set up right. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you've been consistent about that. But it does look like your video is a little grainy, though.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah. Do you see a little gear icon at the bottom of your screen?
yeah.
Yeah. When you click on that, what does it say in terms of stream quality?
It says, well, it says my video resolution is standard def. I could go to high def and see if that changes it.
Yeah. So there should be a drop down there.
Yeah, I just changed it to high def. Oh, I can see a difference.
Yeah.
Can you see a difference?
Not yet. It
No.
may take like 4, 5, 6 seconds to work its way across the interwebs. But
Right.
so yeah, that's way better. It just came across to me. So
Cool. Well, there we go.
see, you learn something new every day.
Right on.
So all right, Terry. Well, have a great
Cool.
weekend and be well. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Career Happy Hour. We're here every Friday, so please come with your questions, bring your friends, and we look forward to supporting your success. Take care. Have a great weekend.